Welcome back to the Band Guide, where we use GarageBand to create professional sounding music. I'm your band guy, Colin, and today I have 3 tricks for you to really take more control over GarageBand Drummer. GarageBand Drummer is such a powerful tool, but it can be a little bit limiting and a little bit frustrating to work with at times. So I want to show you 3 ways that I work around that to get even more out of GarageBand Drummer, make it way more powerful and way more customizable. But before we get into that, I want to give you something. GarageBand drums sound great, but they can sound a little bit fake. So what I've done is I've figured out a way to make them sound way more real, and I put it together in a free downloadable guide. There's a link in the description below where you can grab this guide completely free that walks through how to make GarageBand drums sound way more real. It's super impressive what you can do with it. So be sure to grab it from the link in the description below. It's really going to help you out, but let's go ahead and jump into GarageBand Drummer. Okay, so all of these tricks have to do with using MIDI to get more control over our GarageBand Drummer. So the first thing we'll need to do is create a new track. So go up here and hit this plus button to create a new track, and then be sure to select Software Instrument, and then hit Create. Now this is going to default to a classic electric piano, but we're going to go back over here and just select Drum Kit, and then select whichever drum kit you like the sound of best. So in this case, I'm going to do the Detroit Garage. And now we have a MIDI track that is playing drums the same way our drummer track is. So the first trick I want to show you to get more control over GarageBand Drummer with this MIDI track now is to use this MIDI track to lock in your part. So if you've played around with GarageBand Drummer, you may have noticed it can easily change what's happening in a part. So if I just drag this over here, it now changes what's being played in this a little bit. And if I go to my edit window and select my track and tweak some things, all of a sudden now the entirety of the parts change a little bit from what they just were. So it's easy to accidentally mess up what you'd set up in your session, and you obviously don't necessarily want to do that. So we can use this MIDI track to copy what we know we like as we move throughout our song. So once you get a part figured out, if you're like, okay, I love the way this drum part is working in the intro of the song, then what I can do is select that region, go to the start of it, hit Command-C on the keyboard to copy it, then select the new MIDI track and hold Command-V to paste it. And that's just going to paste it wherever our cursor is, so you need to make sure that you put this marker at the start of that region. But we can do that with everything. So if I want to take everything I've figured out so far, I can select it, hit Command-C, go down to this track and hit Command-V. I recommend doing this as you're working on your part to make sure that you never lose progress. Make sure that nothing ever accidentally gets changed on you and then you're like, oh man, I don't remember what this was, but I think this is different than what I liked before, right? So this helps you lock in your part. That's number 1. Really, really helpful, because now there's no way for me to accidentally, select any of these variables that are going to change it. Or if I accidentally just bump it over a little bit, it's going to change a part. It protects you from all of that. It locks in your part. So now this part is just what this part is. And if we listen to it here, if I solo the drummer track, it sounds exactly the same. It just can't be messed with anymore. So use this to lock in your parts as you're working, and then mix on this track once you get your finalized part. Okay, the next trick I want to show you is how we can use this to customize our part. So for example, in this section right here, there's a couple of fills in this area, and I like this first fill, but as I get to the end of this section, I have a specific fill in mind, and it's not doing it. I want it to kind of build up with those guitars. So you hear those guitars build up right here. It's weird to me that the drums are just continuing to play straight and then just a short fill at the end. But I like this first fill, so now that I've locked it in down here, what I can do is play around with and change this until I get a fill that I like at the end. And I could either change this one here, just play around with my settings until it gives me a fill that I like better. If we listen to this now, still not what we want. I could play around with it here, right? Something like that. Play around with it on that same track, or I can make a new track here, just hit this plus button, and use this as a fill-only track. So I can use this just to create a fill for that section. So let's first figure out how long this section I want this fill to be is. So if we listen through here, I think I want to start so we have 2 full bars. So I'm going to go down to the MIDI here and shorten this section so that I now have an empty space that I can add in a new fill. And then I'm going to go over here and I'm just going to solo this and I'm going to play around it until I get a fill that I like. That could be cool. Let's try that. So if I take this Command-C to copy it, go over here and go down to this track and hit Command V to paste it. Let's listen to that in the context of this track now. Cool, right? Okay, so we're getting closer to what I want it to be, and I might play around. Maybe I'll even create another section of this, and I'll play around with even a couple more fill ideas. So let's shorten it a little bit more here. Right? You can play around. Now I have 2 or 3 fill options. I could take this one, copy it in, and then listen to that in the context. I could hit Command Z to go back to what I had there before, undo. So you can play around with it until you get the fill that you want without having to worry about losing that first fill that you know you like. So this one here, still there, but I have played around with this second fill until I got it to where I wanted it to be. All right, and our third and final trick is to write your own parts. So generally speaking, even if I really want to change a drum part, I'm going to use the GarageBand Drummer as my starting point. But let's say I really want to change a rhythm here. So if we go back to the very beginning of this song, right? Maybe I want to make this kick way busier. I want to add in a lot more kick drum. So this is laid out here. If you hit the key, you can hear what sound it is doing. You can find where the different sounds are for your drum kit, and then I can go over here and I can actually write in. So I can go and add in another kick drum. So I could write a note and then keep this in mind here. This is your velocity. This is how hard that hit that I have selected here is going to be. So you want to vary these, but you also want to make sure that they're hitting as hard as you want them to be. So this kick drum is hitting at 118. This one's at 113. I'm going to put one in the middle here that is somewhere in between those, so they're not identical, but closer to that range as opposed to something, you know, way down here. But play around with it. There's no right or wrong. Just get the right velocity that feels right to you. So if we go back to the beginning here, now my part is this instead of, right, much, much busier, and we have the super cool, you know, maybe that's right for you. Do that every other one. You can really customize it. Or if you, let's say you just want to add a single crash and kick drum hit, right? So I can go to the end here and I can actually add in a crash and a kick drum hit. So let's start with a kick drum hit. So I'm just going to draw that where I know this kick drum is, which is C1. And then I can find a crash sound. Let's do this crash sound. So I just follow this note over and I can just add a crash right there. And then now, so if I wanted it to stop right there and just crash and ring out, I've done that. Or I actually found this the other day, there is a crash and stop. So if I wanted to crash to hit and then stop, I could change this one out here for this note right here. So follow this over. So it could be like, so just a quick hit and stop instead of ringing out. Or if I wanted to write out the exact drum fill that I have in mind, I could do that for the end of this here, right? So, you know, I found one that I like, but in my mind originally it was going to be like a ga-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. So what I could do is I could go in here and delete everything that's in here and custom write my own part. Let's find that crash. And I could do a kick drum, so just be every 8th note, and you want to be sure to vary these a little bit. And if we're going to go ga-do-do-do-do-do, from a drummer's perspective, you have a big first hit, and then it builds up from that. So the first hit will be hard, and then it's going to drop back down quite a bit, and we're going to drop, and then just slowly build up from there. So each one of these is going to get a little bit harder. If I select it all, I can hold Option here and click and drag this up to the snare. Now there are 2 snares. There's a rim shot snare and then just kind of a quieter hit snare. So I'm going to take this and drop these down to the quieter hit and pull just the last couple up for the rim shot, which is a really hard hit. So you get the idea, play with that a little bit more, but that gets you in the ballpark of a very specific fill that you can write out by hand. Now, again, be sure you're varying your velocities, and sometimes I'll also even vary my positions just a little bit so they're not all perfectly on, to give it a slightly more realistic feel, but don't go crazy. You don't want to be too far off, but just a little bit can make it feel a little bit more real. Super powerful. I hope this is helpful. If you haven't already, be sure to download my free guide to make GarageBand drums sound more real. They can sound so real, but it takes a little bit of work and some intentionality. There's a link in the description below where you can grab that completely free. Before we go, I want to hear from you. Have you been using MIDI in your workflow with GarageBand Drummer? Let me know in the comments below. If this video was helpful, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next week with another video.
One thing at a time.